Dr. Elias Venn had never truly fit into Halcyon Lake. The community was a sprawling, pristine paradise, a crescent of $5 million mansions clinging to the glittering edge of a man-made lake. HOA regulations dictated everything, from the length of your grass to the hue of your patio umbrellas. It was designed to be paradise curated to a fault. But for Elias, a former quantum engineer who'd retreated from the public eye after a scandal at NASA, Halcyon Lake was simply quiet, and quiet was all he needed, or so he thought. Elias's home, an angular structure of glass, steel, and dark, composite wood, was the only house built slightly off-grid, just beyond the HOA's visual comfort zone. It perched like a sentinel on the northeast bank of the lake, where the waters were deeper, darker, and less frequently used for paddleboarding and social brunch cruises. Most residents referred to it as the fortress, murmuring suspicions at cocktail parties about what the crazy scientist was doing in there. He was building a bridge, but this wasn't any ordinary bridge. It had no traditional materials, no wooden beams or concrete slabs. Its form was elegant and skeletal, forged from hyperlight alloys and laced with shimmering translucent filaments that danced like starlight. It extended from Elias's private dock across a narrow, silent cove, connecting his home to a secluded island that appeared on no maps and was supposedly protected under HOA conservation law. What the neighbors didn't know was that the island wasn't just a piece of land. It was the center of something much older and far more dangerous than any community regulation could grasp. Elias had discovered it purely by accident. A year earlier, when testing an experimental gravity sensor near the water's edge, he had detected a spatial anomaly, something that bent light and magnetism like a lens, hidden just beneath the lake's surface. Over the following months, he drilled quietly, mapped ancient stone formations, and uncovered fragments of alien tech buried beneath silt and bedrock. What lay beneath the island wasn't natural. It pulsed with energy, an interdimensional heartbeat dormant for centuries. And now it was waking up. The bridge he was constructing wasn't for convenience. It was a containment device, a harmonic stabilizer designed to neutralize dimensional fluctuations leaking from the core. Its positioning, design, and quantum lattice were all calculated to the millimeter. Elias had no choice but to build it quickly, and unfortunately, very visibly. The first warning came in the form of a letter from the HOA, written in icy, passive-aggressive legalese. Dear Resident Venn, it has come to our attention that you have begun constructing an unauthorized structure across shared lakefront property. As per our bylaws, Section 14(3)(a), no new structures may be erected without prior approval from the HOA Architectural Committee. This includes walkways, bridges, or unsightly installations. We request immediate cessation of this activity. He ignored it. The second warning came with photos of the bridge attached and a fine totaling $25,000. Elias scanned it, barely glancing at the signature. Graham Whitley, HOA President. A retired tech executive with an ego the size of the lake itself. Graham had once attempted to introduce facial recognition gates to the community entrance for security reasons. When residents protested, he had it installed anyway, on his own property. Elias knew a direct confrontation would be fruitless, so he continued working, faster now. The bridge was nearly complete, the containment algorithms syncing well with the pulses beneath the island. He only needed a few more days, but they didn't give him days. One night, under the cover of darkness, the HOA sent in a demolition crew. Quiet, unmarked trucks, floodlights, and power tools. By dawn, the bridge lay in jagged ruins, pieces floating like shattered glass atop the lake's surface. Elias stood at the end of his dock, unmoving, as the sunrise painted the sky in red and gold. Neighbors watched from afar, some smug, others curious as the man they thought was strange and reclusive merely stared at the ruins, expression unreadable. They thought they'd won, that they'd preserved their aesthetic order, that they'd forced the odd man to comply. What they didn't know was that they'd broken a seal, an ancient, finely tuned lattice holding something at bay. As the light caught the surface of the lake, a shimmer passed beneath, subtle but unmistakable. Elias turned away silently and walked back to his home. In the basement lab, His AI assistant Lyra came to life with a pulse of blue light. "Dr. Venn," she said calmly. "Containment breach registered. Energy levels beneath the lake are rising." He didn't flinch. "Then it begins," he whispered. Outside, Halcyon Lake glistened unaware. Years before the bridge was ever conceived, Dr. Elias Venn had discovered the first anomaly entirely by accident. He had been mapping magnetic variations along the northeast edge of Halcyon Lake, not for any particular reason, just an old habit of tinkering with the unknown. Most of the retired millionaires who inhabited the community spent their days golfing or holding charity wine tastings. Elias preferred electromagnetic surveys and gravitational wave modeling. It gave him peace, structure. But one afternoon, as he was testing a modified flux scanner, a prototype he'd developed in his NASA days, the readings had spiked violently near the waterline. A dense, erratic distortion beneath the ground. Not seismic, not magnetic. Something else. Something alive. It was small at first, a curious dip in the quantum field. But as he ran more tests and fed the data through his lab's quantum AI system, Lyra, the anomaly began to bloom into something larger, darker, and utterly unnatural. Under layers of sediment, stone, and reinforced concrete from the lake's artificial construction, there was something ancient embedded in the earth. It radiated energy patterns that defied classical physics, what Lyra identified as a dimensional anchor. A relic perhaps of an interdimensional machine sealed long before humans ever colonized the continent. Elias spent months unearthing fragments, strange alloy shards impervious to heat and force, buried geometric symbols that resembled no known language, and small pockets of suspended gravity fields. Every discovery only confirmed what he had feared. The lake wasn't natural. It was built on top of something, perhaps even around something, intentionally. A cage, or worse, a cover-up. And when the HOA had chosen to build their luxury enclave here, they had unknowingly built mansions over an unstable rift in the fabric of space. That was when Elias knew containment was needed, not just observation. So he began constructing the bridge, not to walk across, but to function as a quantum mesh stabilizer. Every beam, every thread of plasma wire was tuned to pulse in harmony with the entity slumbering beneath the island. The bridge didn't just stretch across the lake. It acted like a lattice lock designed to keep the energy sealed within its proper dimensional phase. Without it, the entity would leak. First in energy waves, then in memory, then in mass. But with the bridge gone, all that work had been shattered. Literally. Back in his lab beneath his home, Elias watched Lyra's displays light up like a constellation in crisis. The core signature, the central anomaly, was shifting. Slow at first, then gaining momentum. Unstable dimensional energy was leaking upward through the ground, into the lake water, into the foundations of the surrounding homes. "Lyra," Elias said, "how long before visible anomalies reach the surface?" "Estimated time, 96 hours. Acceleration possible if further interference occurs. Pattern suggests external exposure in 72 hours under current progression." He stood in silence, his fists clenched at his sides. The bridge had been more than just a precaution. It had also acted as a warning system, a focusing ring to prevent wild surges from the entity. Without it, the dormant core was now exposed, vulnerable to interaction, to provocation. And worse, to awakening. Already the signs were appearing. Lights flickering inside homes around the lake, systems malfunctioning. One family had emailed the HOA about a strange hum that came from their floorboards at night. Another had complained about their dog acting paranoid, barking at reflections in the water that weren't there. And Lyra had picked up more than energy spikes. There were memory fluctuations, residents forgetting simple things like the names of neighbors they'd known for years, or where they had parked their cars just moments earlier. These weren't accidents, they were bleed-throughs. "The bridge was suppressing more than we realized," Elias muttered. "It's not just a power source, it's intelligent." He pulled up a map of the lake and the surrounding homes. 12 mansions lined the perimeter, all expensive, all proud. and now all in danger. Yet still, the HOA had the audacity to send him cease and desist letters blaming him for suspicious activity around the lake. They had no idea what they had done, what they had broken. Elias tapped a code into a secure terminal. The screen blinked, and a hidden compartment in the wall slid open, revealing a compact cube, dark metal humming softly with bluish energy. Inside it was the core of Project Exodus, a contingency device designed not to contain the lake, but to drain it entirely, to expose everything. "Lyra," he said calmly, "begin countdown protocol. Enable full system integration. I want the ISO failsafe ready in 48 hours. Confirmed," the AI responded. Exodus protocol initialized. From above, through the reinforced ceiling, Elias could hear the lapping of the lake water changing rhythm. A deeper resonance now, a frequency that wasn't quite human anymore. The neighbors had taken his bridge. Soon, he would take their lake, and everything buried beneath it. The lake changed first. At night, the waters no longer lay still. Gentle waves moved against the wind's direction, forming subtle spirals that converged toward the center of the lake, like something was breathing underneath. Lights flickered along the shore. Porch lamps, dock sensors, even solar pathway lights would stutter as though caught in a silent glitch. Residents began to whisper nervously at HOA meetings. Most dismissed the signs. "The lake's just reacting to temperature shifts," one man said. "We've had odd magnetic weather before," claimed another. But deep down, something primal twisted in their guts. Nature didn't behave this way. Then came the dreams. Graham Whitley, ever the confident HOA president, was the first to speak publicly about them. "They're just stress-induced," he declared at a morning meeting in the community hall, sipping a triple foam espresso. "I dreamed about a door under my dock glowing blue and I stepped through it. That's not ominous, it's just modern anxiety. We're all overworked." But others had seen the door too, and some had gone through it in their sleep. What they saw beyond was never the same, but the feeling was consistent. Weightlessness, distortion, memory loss, and something watching. Meanwhile, Dr. Elias Venn made no appearances. His house remained sealed, the lights low, the perimeter secure. The few who dared pass by on boats saw flashes of light inside his basement level at night, bright pulses of green, violet, and shimmering silver that bled through his blacked-out windows. He was preparing. In the isolation of his lab, the countdown for Project Exodus ticked steadily downward. The failsafe device, a quantum siphon, was nearing readiness. Its design was brutal and efficient. Reverse the gravitational lock below the lake and release the pocket dimension beneath, draining both the physical water and the embedded energy signature trapped within. It would empty the lake into the null layer, a dimensional dead zone Elias had discovered decades ago in deep space modeling. Nothing could escape from it, not even time, but Lyra had issued a warning. Core expansion has accelerated. Estimated breach in 46 hours. Additional anomaly. Entity intelligence levels rising. Unknown reaction to upcoming siphon event. It wasn't just leaking energy anymore. It was learning. Elias modified the plan. He didn't want to just drain the lake. He wanted the truth revealed, to show the residents, especially the smug, arrogant Graham Whitley, what they had built their paradise on. He integrated projection nodes into the siphon array. When the lake drained, the entire community would see the structures hidden beneath. The alien pylons that shimmered with impossible angles, the doors that led nowhere but screamed when opened. The night before the activation, the lake struck back. In House No. 4, owned by a couple who had spent their lives investing in biotech startups, glass exploded inward from every lake-facing window. The water outside didn't move, but inside the floors were soaked, as if moisture had risen straight up through the walls. The couple was found unconscious, skin blue and ice cold, whispering in unknown tongues. Doctors said it was hypothermia. Elias knew better. That same night, HOA security drones circling the lake glitched and crashed into the water, their circuits overloaded with static that pulsed to a rhythm. 4 long pulses, 2 short, 1 long. Lyra recorded it. "They're communicating now," she reported. "The pattern is consistent with frequency-based cognition. They are aware of surface activity." Elias stood before the siphon chamber, bathed in the device's cold blue light. His hand hovered over the initiation panel. All systems were green. "Activate Project Exodus," he said. In the first 2 minutes, the lake level dropped 3 inches, then 5, then a foot. At first, residents believed it was a pipe malfunction. The HOA scrambled to contact the water authority, only to be told that no local systems were connected to Halcyon Lake. It was self-contained, an artificial reservoir with no inlets or drains. And yet, the water kept falling. By hour 2, panic spread. Lawns browned as the shore retreated. Expensive, handcrafted docks cracked and collapsed without water to support them. Boats were stranded. Fish died in clusters, their bodies floating belly up in the muddy shallows. The once pristine surface of the lake turned murky and dark, revealing outlines beneath the water, structures too angular and too large to be natural. Graham Whitley stood on his patio in disbelief, shouting into a satellite phone, demanding someone be arrested. Someone had done this. It had to be Elias. And Graham was right. Inside his lab, Elias watched the data scroll by, watching the entropy ratio rise. "Now they'll see," he whispered. "They'll see everything." Just before midnight, the siphon reached 60%. The lakebed cracked open like dry earth, and ancient pylons rose from beneath, twisting metal spires humming with light and memory. From the center of the crater, a glow began to rise, and something was waking up. At precisely 3:17 a.m., the last of the lake water vanished. What was once a shimmering centerpiece of Halcyon Lake Estates was now a gaping basin of mud, stone, and something far older than the human mind could comprehend. The siphon had done its work flawlessly. Project Exodus had activated every siphoning node in a perfect sequence, collapsing the containment shell and draining the last drops of water into the dimensional sink Elias had calculated beneath the bedrock. But it didn't stop at water. Now, exposed, the alien infrastructure hidden beneath the lake lay bare beneath the stars. Vast metallic structures, taller than homes, rose from the cracked earth like jagged bones. Some pulsated with dim bioluminescent hues, while others emitted a frequency too low to hear, but strong enough to shake the glass in nearby windows. Glowing circuits spread like veins through the terrain, trailing off into the soil and vanishing beneath Halcyon's luxury lawns. The HOA residents woke in terror, drawn from their homes by a humming that filled the air. At first, many thought it was some form of elaborate terrorist act. Others believed it to be a sinkhole or geological collapse. But when they reached the edge of what used to be the lake, silence fell. It wasn't natural, and it was pulsing. Graham Whitley arrived in a golf cart wearing a robe and wielding a flashlight like it would somehow shield him. "What the hell is this?" he growled at no one in particular, though his eyes searched for Elias. The crowd of neighbors stood in stunned silence, a mix of horror and confusion on their faces. They murmured among themselves, trying to rationalize the impossible. But then something moved. From the center of the crater, a monolithic obelisk slowly emerged. It wasn't floating and it wasn't climbing. It simply appeared, as if rising was merely a change in its awareness of location. The structure stood over 200 feet tall, with a black surface so dark it absorbed moonlight, framed only by thin edges of shifting violet. The hum intensified. Elias watched it all from the observation deck inside his lab, projected through Lyra's sensor suite. He adjusted a dial, zooming in on the obelisk's surface, symbols etched in spirals, moving, reshaping, communicating. They were no longer static carvings. They were language. "They're responding," he whispered. "Entity. Identification in progress," Lyra responded. "Primary structure exhibits pattern resonance with pre-contact signals recorded at Groom Lake Facility, 1983. Translation underway." Elias already knew what Lyra was going to say next. He had feared it for years, ever since the first anomaly. Still, hearing the words spoken aloud made it real. Dr. Venn, Lyra continued calmly. Structure is not dormant. Conscious state detected. Entity appears to be aware of human observation. Outside, Graham stepped forward to the edge of the drained lake, pointing up at the obelisk. We have to call the government, the military. This is a weapon or a satellite, or something. We can't let this freak. He turned, gesturing wildly toward Elias's property. Run this entire community into the ground. But then the obelisk spoke, not in words, not in sound, in thought. The air twisted, and every mind present was pierced by a flash of imagery, colors not yet named, concepts folded inside one another, and a single unifying command that echoed in their heads. Return the bridge. Dozens of people clutched their heads. A woman screamed. Another collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Others stood silently, tears streaming down their cheeks for reasons they couldn't explain. Memories that weren't theirs leaked into their minds. Visions of a time before Halcyon, before the lake, before language itself. Elias remained unaffected. He had been preparing for this contact. He activated his neural dampener, a thin circlet beneath his collar that shielded his brain from psychic interference, and instructed Lyra to maintain observation only. No responses. No signals. They had to listen first. Graham stumbled backward, breathing heavily, pale with panic. This is your fault, he said to the air, to Elias, to anyone who would listen. You brought this here. No, Elias said, stepping outside at last, standing on the edge of the crater. His voice was calm, resolute. It was always here. You built your dreams on top of its prison, and then you tore down the only thing keeping it asleep. The obelisk shifted again. A single panel on its surface dissolved into liquid metal, revealing a chamber filled with floating geometric objects, impossible shapes that defied dimension. Something inside was coming forward. Elias turned to the crowd. You need to leave. All of you. What's coming won't care about your property lines, your bylaws, or your lakeside views. A low frequency boomed across the empty lake bed. The awakening had begun. They didn't leave. Even after the obelisk had spoken, not with sound but through thought that shattered dreams and bled into waking minds, the residents of Halcyon Lake Estates clung to denial like it was armor. Fear, disbelief, pride, whatever. The combination, it held them fast. They called lawyers, emailed news stations, demanded meetings with local officials, but there were no protocols for what was happening here. No page in the HOA manual for interdimensional artifact emergence. By morning, 3 residents were missing. One had walked into the exposed lake bed during the night, murmuring to himself. Security drone footage showed him standing before the obelisk, arms raised as if in praise before he vanished. No flash, no sound, just gone. Another had torn through her mansion, smashing every reflective surface in the house while screaming, "It's watching through the mirrors!" And the third had left only a message scrawled on the wall. The bridge was a warning, not a wall. Still, they stayed. Graham Whitley tried to maintain order, organizing patrols and offering incentives for any evidence proving Elias Venn's culpability. But control slipped through his fingers faster than lake water. Residents began seeing distortions in time, objects that vanished then reappeared in impossible places, clocks running backward, voices whispering from faucets. A man reported finding a replica of his own home 3 doors down, identical in every detail, but with no occupants and paintings that watched him. And then, the duplicates appeared. It started with children's toys, harmless at first, then furniture, then entire rooms. But not quite right. Sofas slightly too long, windows positioned half an inch off, subtle, disquieting imperfections. As if the lake was remembering the homes from memory, but couldn't quite replicate them. Elias knew it was accelerating. The entity beneath the lake, what he now called the deep construct, was not just waking. It was testing the boundaries of its containment. The siphon had disrupted the balance, exposing the construct to human consciousness. It didn't attack directly. That wasn't how it functioned. It explored, it learned, and, above all, it reflected. He had seen it once before. A fleeting transmission from an abandoned European research station that had stumbled on a micro-anomaly buried under the Carpathians. They'd triggered a breach. The result had been the spontaneous duplication of half the team's memories into architectural space, entire corridors that mapped their dreams. Eventually, they collapsed into themselves. Elias returned to his lab. Lyra's voice, usually calm, now held an edge of static. Containment integrity, 38%. Deep construct growth pattern, no longer predictable. Conscious evolution active. How? Long until physical assimilation begins, he asked. A pause. 31 hours, maybe less, all predictive models failing. He stared at the schematics of the bridge, his original design, built not just to suppress energy but to harmonize it, to act as a conduit between this dimension and the dormant one below. That bridge had been surgically tuned to prevent resonance, collapse. But with it destroyed, the construct had no restraints, and it was adapting. Build another bridge, Lyra offered, possibility of stalling the event. I don't have time, Elias muttered. Not unless... He turned to the core of the siphon array, still humming quietly. There was another function, one he'd never intended to use. Reverse induction. If activated, it wouldn't just drain, it would flood, forcing dimensional energy back into the construct. The risk was enormous. It could overload the entity's consciousness, triggering an implosion event. But it might also seal the rift permanently, or destroy everything. Elias hesitated only a moment. He keyed in the override. Lyra, prepare the core for reverse induction. Seal all outer doors. Redirect power from secondary stabilizers. Are you certain? The AI asked. No, he said, but they gave me no choice. Above, the air shifted. A wave of pressure pushed through the community, bending trees, cracking asphalt. People screamed as their shadows detached for seconds before snapping back. Doors opened to rooms that hadn't existed before. One man walked into his garage and found a train station inside, abandoned, flickering, but undeniably real. It was unraveling. Elias stood at the control console. His hands hovered over the activation switch. Across every screen, Lyra displayed a countdown. 10 seconds until overload. He whispered into the console mic, voice calm, steady. To anyone still listening, leave now. This was never your paradise. You built on top of a warning. 5 seconds. Return. The bridge, came the construct's voice. Not through speakers, but through the walls, through bone, through thought. 3 seconds. Elias smiled bitterly. Too late. He pressed the button. From beneath the lake bed, the siphon core exploded, in light, raw dimensional force flooding upward like a geyser of stardust and shattered physics. The pylons screamed, the obelisk convulsed, and the construct wailed, a sound not of pain but of rage and recognition. Reality folded, the world split, for just an instant, and then... silence. When the light faded, there was no lake, no obelisk, no houses. Only a blackened crater lined with melted soil and the smell of burnt ozone. Halcyon Lake Estates had become a scar in the earth, and at its center a single structure remained. A bridge, new, whole, waiting.